And a revocation would just embitter millions of citizens in this country that voted for Brexit and will feel their vote betrayed. Even a referendum is not necessarily a way to settle the issue. It's difficult to foresee how a leave option that is imposed top-down can be seen as legitimate by a large number of leave voters. Across the country and across the political spectrum, there will be people that would say that the new referendum with that leave option is not a legitimate referendum, and the result will be challenged if it's too close to call, if the turnout is lower than the previous time, and there will be call for another referendum in a week's time. So this is why I think that citizen assemblies are a way to overcome these problems. I think Neil Lawson from Compass is somewhere in the room, said it better than anyone else. The way out of the Brexit crisis must be more democratic than the way in. So we need, within citizen assemblies, this democratic way forward, and we think also that we need a long-term solution. We need a long-term solution because we are facing an unprecedented level of divisions in the country that is not going to go away whatever we do in the next couple of months, and that needs to be healed through a process that brings the country together, brings leaders and remainers together. And because I think I'm sure all of you have experienced in the daily life that the conversation between many remainers and many leaders is harsher now than it was 2 years ago. So we're not getting better than that. Of course, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take a side on the Brexit divide. DiEM is proud to have campaigned against Brexit with Ward, with McDonald and many others in 2016. But of course, once Brexit had won, we also need to recognize that result, respect that result, and don't pretend that it didn't happen. Yet we still need to reject the government claims that they interpret the will of the people. They don't. We need to ask the people what the will is, and we need to ask that in a proper process. And then, of course, there is the political and constitutional deadlock in Parliament over the Brexit crisis, which has become the worst constitutional crisis in 400 years. And we have to say it in every event, every time we speak. We need to say it. What happened in the last month in Britain is not normal. We consider a coup in any democratic country in Europe. This is an unmandated prime minister that didn't go through an election, didn't win a confidence vote in parliament, that shut down a parliament in the midst of a political crisis because he didn't want the parliament to have a say in it. So it's it's what shouldn't happen. And so the fact that the prime minister can maybe, we don't know, legitimately do so is the ultimate proof that there is a problem with the constitution in this country that we need to address. And if we are to set up a process of citizen assemblies in the country over Brexit, this is also the way in which we start a discussion around the constitution. It will be a constitutional revolution if we see citizen assemblies on Brexit. So, Yanis is not here yet.
Yeah, so we get the thing right first. So, if we do it right way up.
Yeah, much that is fun. Yeah.
Did everything that very well? Go ahead. As you might know, citizen assemblies are popping up everywhere in the world. We've seen dozens of new initiatives in 5 continents. I'm going to just mention 2 because they are quite famous and most of you will have heard of them. In Ireland, in 2016, a process of citizen assemblies started discussing 5 divisive issues that the country faced at the time, producing 5 reports. One of them informed a referendum that was held in May 2018, which settled a matter which was complex in Ireland as the matter of abortion. We are seeing in many cities in the UK, citizen assemblies being set up on the climate crisis. In Scotland, there is one which is about to start on the independence question. And of course, there has been in 2016 in Manchester this citizen assembly on Brexit organized by the UCL Constitutional Unit with a large number of groups. Some of the people from UK and Changing Europe involved might be in the room today, I don't know. So I will be very welcome to hear from them. Our proposal is really inspired by their work. Why citizen assemblies are a good idea? Well, because they allow for an informed decision-making process where experts can kind of aid with report and fact-based presentations are a debate which is more, which is based on information and not on fake news. They help building consensus, and we can see discuss why that is. And their outcomes are usually regarded as more legitimate. And we need a legitimate process in this context. There are, broadly speaking, I'm going to go a bit quicker now, 5 phases in the setting up of a citizen assembly. First one is the recruitment process, in which you want to select randomly by sortition citizens that you want to discuss a specific issue. And of course, if the issue is Brexit, this representation should take into account also the way people vote in the referendum. This is followed by a learning phase in which the participants learn about the subject at hand through the experts. Then there is a deliberation phase, which is also facilitated by professional facilitators that help having a discussion which is not a confrontation, but which is a way in which citizens come together, understand each other, empathize with each other if possible. And that helps building decision making which is more based on consensus. Of course, the last part is the impact. We want the outcome of these citizen assemblies to be impactful both on society at large and on decision makers. We need to know what the citizen assemblies are discussed. There are 5 design principles that are in the proposal that at some point you will receive. We are printing 30 of them, so each 2 of you have one. And this would be good to discuss this with our panelists and to know what they think about each of them. The first one is that we think that solution of the Brexit problem should be start with an act of parliament that say that this is the way forward, that we want to see citizen assemblies having a say about what we see in this country for the last years. The second point we want to make, which is a bit more controversial in a way, is that this is the map of the referendum results in 2016. Of course, you can see immediately that there is a deep local element in this vote. The vote is very different in different regions and nations in the UK. And we think UK-wide citizen assemblies would not probably be seen as necessarily representative by people in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, or in some of the regions in the UK, especially if by sortition, for instance, there aren't people from a certain region. So we think we need to go and be more ambitious, and we suggest that a rolling process of citizen assemblies in each region and each nation of the United Kingdom would be more beneficial. This means organizing 10 of them. That means more time, resources, but it's a way to go to build this democratic process. We think they should be inclusive in the sense that not only they should represent all parts of society in terms of age, race, sex, political orientation, but also, of course, how people voted in the referendum, so corresponding proportion of leavers and voters. And also, there are a lot of people that didn't vote, and so also those should be represented. EU citizens in this country, citizens from other countries which are not European, young people, regions abroad, that in some way we can connect to the region where they were living. There should be enough time to do this and enough resources to do this. We can discuss about the cost of this, but to give you an idea, an assembly of 100 people can cost about £50,000 if it meets over a couple of months or so. Well, the government is spending £100 million to advertise a no-deal Brexit. So you see, these are different. Without talking about the millions of pounds that every council in this country spend on experts, consultancy, and time. We need. So this is probably the most difficult problem that this country face and any citizen assembly in the world have faced. We don't think we can get away with a few weeks. We think we need probably a few months, including the time to pass a normal parliament, so maybe a year this time we need. And then, of course, we cannot set what the citizen assembly should do. The citizens should be able to come up with their own solution. Brexit means Brexit? Probably not. Brexit should mean what the citizens say it means. And so we should let them free to decide their own agenda and their own objectives. And then this quote that we liked a lot from Stuart White, a democratic and political theorist that says that democratic theory is in a time when the people have a right to settle what happens precisely because what is at stake is a set of very basic questions about how we are ruled. This was said way before the referendum. Well, I think Brexit represents a situation like this very precisely. Two quick points, finally, about democracy and time. There are two ways out of this crisis. One is the way which is proposed by Boris Johnson, delivering Brexit without any discussion, any accountability, and any democracy about all the choices down the road from the 1st of November. The other way is the long way, is the way in which all citizens are consulted about every step of the process. It's a more painful way, it's a more complicated way, but it's the only way that Democrats can accept. And if we manage to democratize Brexit, nothing prevents us to democratize the economy, the UK Constitution, the European Union, and we cannot go on to imagination, Yanis. And finally, time. There is a lot of pressure in this country to get on with it, whether through a no-deal Brexit that delivers it, or whether through a revocation of Article 50. Sometimes the long way is a short way. We think that we are not asking to delay Brexit by asking to take a bit more time to do a democratic process which is sound. We are in fact anticipating a democratic discussion that we should happen anyway if we let these things go in this direction. And on this I will shut up because I spoke too much. But we wanted to show you a video of a Citizens Assembly which is ongoing at the moment in Brussels. There should be some audio from this, but was it? It's mine.
The UK is not the only place in Europe looking to rejuvenate democracy.
Wait.
In the heart of the UK.
Well, Jay set it up. This is a project that started in Brussels. It's a local group of people that started as Citizens Assemblies to discuss issues which are relevant locally. And they elected a representative in the institutional assembly that is going to be the spokesperson for what the Citizens Assembly decides. And in this video they tell us how they did it, what's happening there. And yeah. But this continues. I wanted to introduce.
We can use our imagination.
I wanted to pass on the baton to Gabriel Bopham and Trevor McFarlane that are in this first row. Trevor McFarlane has been working extensively with a group of MPs that are working in Citizens Assemblies, and he can tell us a bit about his work in Parliament as well. And Gabriel has been leading the way in this work within DiEM25 and Citizens Assemblies. They are going to interrogate our panelists.
Should we maybe start maybe watch it after the panel?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much, Gabriel. And it's Andrea, and this is Gabriel. Sorry. It's really great to welcome DiEM25 to Labour Party Conference 2019, and at least the conversation on Brexit is happening here, and we're having it, and we're talking about it, which is great. I just wanted to very, very quickly, because I think you've introduced the subject really, really well, Andrea, just say why Labour Party Conference now. I think it's important for people to know that whilst the idea of Citizens Assemblies is often seen as a fringe idea, that people at the top are talking about it. This is now on the Labour Party agenda in some way. And I have to say that that's in no small part down to Lisa Nandy and Stella Creasy, Caroline Lucas, and a group of cross-party MPs. And I know there are some Tories in that group, though I won't out them here. I'll leave now Lisa to do that. but they've been working really, really hard and seriously looking at this project and bringing organisations with experience in this together to look at timelines and all of the 5 desires that Andrea outlined for the 5 working principles. They've been looking at that. But more than that, more recently, they've managed to get on board people like Yvette Cooper. You know, Hilary Benn is now bringing these people in front of the Brexit Select Committee to look into this. And of course, even John McDonnell. So, on all wings of the Labour Party sort of family, that broad church is now being really seriously looked at. So, just thank you to all the panellists for coming to speak about it. Do you want to? I'll hand over now to you, JB, to introduce the panel and to have it how you want it, and I'll just pitch in some questions as you went, but I'm sure you will as well.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. I'll introduce the panel very quickly, and then I think we can just jump straight into it. I hope we can have a really good discussion, and then later on also have a great discussion with you in the audience. So, Julie Ward is an MEP for Labour in the European Parliament. She represents the North West. Lisa Nandy is a Labour MP for Wigan. And Yanis Varoufakis is leader of DiEM25 and also MP for Mera25 in Greece, recently elected. They are all here because over the course of the last few years they have expressed an interest and often worked very hard, for deliberative democracy and for the idea of citizens' assemblies. And well, that's it really. I'm going to sit down now. And I wanted to start off with asking if you would like to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about why this matter is important to you.
Okay, so well, first of all, it is really fantastic to be here, and you know, so I work in the European Parliament. I work with people from 27 different countries, 28 including us. You know, using 24 different languages to sit in a circle to talk until we agree. That's actually how we do things in the European Parliament. It's very different from the way that things happen in Westminster. I'm really aware of that. And I've never been a politician in any other situation. I only ever wanted to defend the Europe that I believe is possible, and I'm still doing that. But they were participating. So I just know that when you have processes that are engaging, and they have to be fun, frankly, you know, and politics doesn't have to be, it doesn't, you know, well, it isn't boring at the minute. I left the world of theatre to become a politician. I mean, what was I doing, you know? Anyway, yeah, no. So for me, I'm really interested in this process because I think that the whole notion of assemblies, people's assemblies, assemblies of people coming together to have that people-to-people dialogue is absolutely crucial right now. And I believe that this gives us a structure, a legitimate structure with a route to something that's sorely, sorely needed. So I'm currently the Vice Chair of the Education and Culture Committee in the European Parliament. Like, I'm really proud of that, you know, because like I'm still an MEP. We had elections, you know, and now they voted me Vice Chair of the Culture and Education Committee. I'm also the Vice President of the Children's Rights Group in the European Parliament as well. And I'm particularly concerned about young people. I feel that their voices have not been heard. They're still not being listened to. They're being told that it's a done deal. There's nothing they can do about it. And when you tell them, yeah, that there have been 1 million people on the streets in London, you know, protesting. In March, we had more than 1 million people on that march. That people are protesting against the shutdown of Parliament. Actually, a lot of young people are going, oh, well, we can do that, can we? And I'm going, yeah, of course you can, you know, you can be active. And we saw on Friday how many young people are so engaged with the issue about climate change because it is an existential threat to their future. And I would say that we have to find ways, we have to find more ways of engaging with our communities, with our excluded communities. And for me, this is a very legitimate, organised structure and process that I think can do that. I think the other thing that I've been really concerned about is the way that people the divisions, and I know Lisa will talk about this, and of course I represent 7.1 million people from Crewe to Carlisle, and that means that I have both Leave and Remain sort of constituencies within my region. But the divisions are so deep in our society now, and they were there already, for sure. And we've got to learn how to talk to each other. We've got to find some mechanisms where we can sit down and talk to people that we don't agree with. And that isn't, I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing it on the doorstep. It's very difficult to have those conversations on the doorstep. A lot of Labour campaigners don't know how to have those conversations. You know, the sort of campaign training that people are doing is still kind of a bit stuck. So I think that anything that allows us to be able to sit together in a room and to have a proper conversation with each other where we can understand the other has got to be a better way of doing things. And then I'd maybe just say, you know, Manchester, which is the largest city in my region, we've just been marking the 200 years of the Peterloo massacre. And so talking about being represented, talking about our rights, talking about democracy, talking about the constant struggle to improve that and to make the franchise wider, not narrower. So I'm really glad that this also includes British citizens who are living in the EU, you know, because they feel very excluded, they're very upset, they feel abandoned actually by Westminster. And being able and making sure that we include the 3 million people in this country who were shut out of that process, you know, who live and work in our country, pay into the tax economy, and weren't allowed to say. I mean, I'm just so appalled at the way the franchise was narrowed, and I think we should be always talking about how we can widen that franchise, not narrow it. And perhaps maybe the last thing is that sorry, that thread's gone. What was it? Civil society. We have a lot of debates and discussions, and we actually had a lot of resolutions and policy recommendations, and we're very aware in my parliament of how civil society is being narrowed, because that's started to happen in some other EU countries. So Poland, for example, Hungary. Hungary is a really good example. And we can see that happening here in this country too. So, you know, a vibrant democratic society has a vibrant civil society, where that space for public discussion is valued, is celebrated. And I think we're on a very, very dangerous road in this country, where we've had you know, politicians write to the heads of universities to ask for lists of people who are doing EU studies. You know, and so anything that enables us to have that wider space for discussion has to be a good thing. I think we have to support that and really push for it, because we're in crisis, serious, serious crisis right now. We're not, you know, I mean, I'm on every march to try and stop Brexit, right? Mm-hmm. But I also recognise that another vote is not, it's an imperfect solution. And if we could, you know, that thing about taking the time, for me would be so much more, would be so better. It would be that legitimate process where I think we could achieve some respect for each other's differences of opinion. So I really value the fact that we've been able to bring DiEM here, you know, and to be in this room together having this conversation.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks very much. So I'm Lisa, I'm the MP for Wigan, and I am also very grateful to DiEM25 for enabling us to do this today, because I can tell you that politics has always been frustrating, but my God, trying to explain citizens' assemblies to members of parliament has been one of the most frustrating experiences of my life. And so it's great to see this many people in a room wanting to know more about it. Some of you may be already ardent supporters of citizens' assemblies, some of you may be deeply sceptical, but thank you for being part of the conversation. Thank you for approaching it with an open mind. That's more than a lot of my colleagues have done so far, so you are very welcome. And I am really concerned about Brexit, like everybody else. The thing that keeps me awake at night at the moment is what is going to happen. I've got a child in my constituency who has a life-limiting illness and was in line for a clinical trial in the EU that was due to start next year. And in March he got a letter saying that because he had a UK address, he was no longer eligible to participate. This little boy will die. He will die before he's 18. The clinical trial may not have saved his life, but it gave him a chance. We haven't reached any kind of agreement about what happens after we leave. That keeps me awake at night. There are serious issues about his access to medication. There are many other MPs who could tell you similar stories around the country. And one of the reasons that I'm so, like everyone I think, so worn down by this, so frustrated by it, and at times so angry by it, is because it seems to me that we've lost the art of compromise. We've lost any sense of that respect, a tolerance for each other's points of view, the willingness to move out of our comfort zone. And one of the things about Citizens Assemblies that really appeals to me is that I think it gives us a chance to heal some very, very deep and fundamental divisions in this country. Those divisions are obviously came to the fore during the referendum. 3 years ago I remember standing in the count in Manchester and seeing those results coming in and feeling the sort of shockwaves around the room. And starting to see this political map emerge of cities, urban centres, where largely people had come out in large numbers to vote Remain, and nearby towns like mine in Wigan, very close to Manchester, coming out in similarly large numbers to leave. That geographical polarisation, what my colleague Will Jennings, an academic at Southampton University, calls two Englands, a consequence of decisions that have been made over several decades. You go back 40 years, and I'm ageing myself here, but I was born in 1979, the year that Margaret Thatcher came to power. And 40 years ago, the Manchester that I was born into was much, much older than towns like Wigan, Bury and Bolton. But over the course of time, as the mines closed and the factories closed and the mills closed, and successive governments decided to invest in cities in the hope that the trickle-out effects would spread to surrounding towns, what we've seen is jobs created in cities, young people grasping the opportunities that were opened up to them and moving away, and as a consequence our towns have aged significantly while our cities have grown much, much younger. So we're now two Englands, not just on Brexit, but actually on almost every social measure. If you look at attitudes to LGBT rights or immigration, human rights, all these things, what you see is a very, very polarised country. Why does it matter? Because actually we've lost the ability to understand one another. And the reality in Wigan is very different to the reality in Walthamstow, my friend Stella Creasy's constituency. So in Walthamstow, a second referendum seems inevitable. It seems obvious that Remain would win. In Wigan, that proposition, for the most part, just seems completely absurd. And so one of the reasons that Stella and I wanted to start to try and push this issue in Parliament is because we felt that somehow those polarised parts of the country had to be brought back together and enabled to have a much richer, larger, deeper conversation about who we become as a country. But it's become incredibly difficult because the political debate in the last 3 years has become toxic, it's become angry, it's become violent in word and deed. And we've seen populism engulfing the political system, the like of which I never really thought I would see in my lifetime. It's not just that now every issue is either black or white, good or bad, good versus evil, moral or immoral. It's also totally incapable of admitting of nuance or difference, but it's also that simplistic, the defining of problems in such a simplistic way, the defining of solutions in such a simplistic way, has become a disease. So we're told that you could just revoke Article 50 and somehow this problem would go away. Well, I can tell you, standing here as somebody who voted Remain in a town where 2/3 of people voted Leave, that is absolutely not the case. We're told that you could just cut all ties and get out of the EU and it would be fine. Well, I can tell you, as someone who represents that little boy waiting for a clinical trial, these arrangements will have to be made, and the processes, I'm sure Yanis would tell you much more eloquently than me, get so much harder if you leave and have to negotiate as a third party. We will be dealing with the consequences of this if we get it wrong for years and years to come. And it's become very exhausting, all of this, and lots of people want quick fixes and they want easy solutions. But actually, here's the hope for me, is that I think the public understands how complex and difficult this is. And I genuinely think, actually, that the debate going on out there in the country is better than the one that goes on at my workplace in Parliament. You know, most families in my constituency were divided over Brexit. My streets where I live, lots of my neighbours voted leave, lots of them voted remain. And they're not shouting at each other over the breakfast table. My neighbour Danny shouted at me when I went to vote on referendum day, "Be proud of your country, Lisa." And I told him to get lost in less polite terms. But he still puts my bins out on a Wednesday when I'm in Parliament. You know, these are, life is going on. We have the ability to talk with one another. So what if we let people back in to this conversation, as we should have done 3 years ago, after a desperately flawed referendum in which people were forced to make a binary choice about something that actually, you know, as Julie hinted at, with the idea that another Europe is possible, is actually a debate that should be happening in shades of grey. What if we let those people back into the conversation and gave us a chance to move forward together as a country? And that's why Stella and Caroline Lucas and Joe Swinson and many others in Parliament have really been pushing for a Citizens Assembly. We've got some Tories on board now, Andrew Percy, David Davies even said that he was quite supportive of the idea. So we're finding support in some quite interesting places. But for the most part, I have to say to you that this has met on typically deaf ears. We've been told that it's far too controversial, Brexit, so you can't possibly let people have a conversation about it. Because they'll just have a big row about it. I mean, if you watched what's been going on in Parliament recently, I hardly think the public can do worse. And what's more, as Stella keeps saying to people who raise that objection, I'm sorry, but if you can do it about abortion in Ireland, then surely we can do it about Brexit across the United Kingdom. They told us that it costs too much. Well, I'm sorry, but we've spent as a country so far £8.3 billion on preparations for no deal. I mean, this is ridiculous. What price democracy? It costs it's a fraction of the cost, but look at the gain for this country. And the one that annoyed me the most was just the general response from many MPs, which was, it's your job to sort this out. There is such a thing as a Citizens Assembly, it's called Parliament. And Stella and I kept coming up against this attitude, but actually, as you've heard and as you'll have understood, this is not about getting rid of representative democracy. There's no easy get out for members of Parliament. We've still got to make a decision. We've still got to decide what we want to do. But the truth is that for someone like me, for whom who was staunchly opposed to the first referendum, I refused to vote for it, and is very opposed to a second one, the truth is that this is about me stepping out of my comfort zone and saying, you know what, a second referendum called for by people to Parliament sounds like a very different prospect to me than a second referendum handed down from Parliament to the people. And this is about legitimacy, and this is about decisions that stick. And you know, Caroline Lucas said when we launched this in Parliament with the help of Compass, and Neil's at the back there, she said, this is really, really frightening for me, because I want a second referendum and remain more than I want anything else. And what if they decide that they want to leave with a deal? But she said, but you know, in the end, what I want is a country that can come together and can heal these divisions and move forward. And I have to be confident that we can win that argument. So, you know, it's scary for us, but it should be possible. And the fact that this is met with such resistance in Parliament is actually symptomatic of something much bigger. Because that space, as Julie says, is incredibly adversarial. It's an institution that is completely resistant to change. You stand in the chamber and you shout at each other from side to side. You go into committee rooms and there are actually physical barriers erected in our committee rooms. There aren't any physical spaces in Parliament where you can actually sit around the table and find common ground. So things will have to change, and we need different tools in our democracy. Referendums are by nature binary. They divide people, they force people to pick a side. But for many people, the world is not in black and white, it's in shades of grey, and most of the problems that we deal with are complex and demanding of nuance. You know, the stupidity of the debate was summed up for me recently with a debate that we started to have about Winston Churchill. John McDonnell was asked in an interview, Winston Churchill, hero or villain? I mean, this is stupid, isn't it? This is so stupid, and the public are cleverer than that, and they deserve a better democracy than the one that is currently on offer. Politics for me, socialism for me, has always been about negotiating our way through difference for the common good. And that is what is at stake here, really. The democracy is at stake right here. Our inability to do that is breaking us as a country. But there is, I believe, a decent, sensible majority out there who can help guide us to a better future. I firmly believe it because I meet them every single day. I meet them in London, where I work for half the week, and I meet them in Wigan just when I'm walking down the street or in Tesco. And people will come up to me and say, thank you for trying. And Rory Stewart came to Wigan recently as part of his leadership campaign. I think he'd sort of got the wrong idea, because I don't think there are that many Tory members in Wigan. But he came along with his characteristic reaching out. He said to me, Lisa, would you like to come and do something together? I said to him, I don't think you've really thought this through. I'm a Labour MP. You're trying to become leader of the Tory party. I can't see how this is going to help you at all. But you know, Tories aren't that popular in Wigan, but he got a phenomenal response. People were coming up to him in the street. A woman said to him, I just want to shake your hand. She said, don't get me wrong, love, never vote Tory, but, she said, what we need to do, Rory, is compromise. And I think that there is a clue to how we get a better country out there, but it doesn't belong in Parliament, it belongs out there in the public. So let's try and raise the stakes here. Let's try and make some noise about Citizens Assemblies, because who knows, we might not just end up with a much more sustainable, better solution to what has become a national crisis. We might just fix our broken politics in the process. Thanks.
Well, what can I say? As the only non-Brit on the panel, I'll start with a message from the continent to all of you. Cheer up! You know what? There is something very unseemly about the way in which Brits constantly lament the state of Britain and the state of British democracy. Cut it off. It's very annoying to the rest of us. You are no worse off than we are. You think that I'm joking, it's not true. Think about the state of the world. We have fascists becoming extremely influential across Europe, in Hungary, in Poland, in Italy. Salvini is not in the government, but he is now in a position getting stronger and waiting for his return with a vengeance. In my country, we have permanent debt bondage, and we have a new Tory government that is more boisterous and toxic than anything you have seen in this country since maybe Margaret Thatcher. If you look at the other side of the font, what need I remind you of who resides in the White House? Look at Bolsonaro in Brazil. Look at Modi in India. You are not worse off than anybody else. You see, there are two ways in which you can be jingoistic and nationalistic. One is the typical British Empire way, and the other is the inverted exceptionalism. Having the audacity to think that you're worse off than the rest. Because if you think that, if you allow yourself to wallow in this sensation that, you know, things suck in this country really badly, this is the greatest gift to Farage and to the nationalists, because all they need to do then is to say, I'll make you great again. So no, enjoy the moment, because you have an explosion of democracy in this country. I mean, 10 years ago there would be no meeting like that, talking about deliberative democracy and talking about citizens' assemblies. In France, you couldn't have that discussion. You know, you have pitched battles between the Gilets jaunes and police. In Germany, you have complete stasis. You know, there's no serious conversation happening in Germany. We had a European Parliament election, I was part of it, I was a candidate in Germany. Yes, I know, it's strange. But people were refusing refusing to talk about Europe in the European Parliament election, in Greece in the European Parliament. Here you've got the most interesting, fascinating, potentially reviving discussion about Europe, about your country, about the world. Yes, British politics is broken, your constitution is in smithereens, your business model is pathetic. As Mark Carney said, you rely on the kindness of strangers. You have 6% current account surplus, you depend on foreign capital coming into London, okay, creating circumstances that make it impossible for the working class to survive by pushing up asset prices, house prices, and so on and so forth. Okay? You have a model which is based on low wages, low productivity, low investment in things that this country needs, and low standards, and low everything. Tony Blair's devolution is incomplete. You've got a situation where you've got a functioning Scottish democracy, but you go south of the Scottish border, what do you have? Disenfranchised Englishmen. Not women, usually Englishmen, right? So Brexit is a crisis of, of English patriotism, in effect, and of a broken down constitution. So my great fear, I'll tell you what my great fear for Britain is, that this wonderful moment in history, which you're not appreciating, you're all moaning about it, okay, will go away. It will prove to be something like, a high-energy democratic pulse of the great British supernova that then gives rise to a black hole. The moment you transition to the black hole will be the moment that either Boris Johnson takes you out of the EU without a deal, or if you have a referendum and you have a Cameron Remain. Because if you have a Cameron Remain, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to go back 10 years ago, and suddenly everything is fantastic. I'm telling you, I'm somebody who campaigned against Brexit in this country. And the reason why I did it, you didn't need yet another European coming here to tell you not to leave the EU. You had plenty. You had Schäuble, you had Christine Lagarde, you had, President Hollande at the time. Those people, every time they opened their mouth, Farage was, sort of clapping and enjoying the boost to the Brexit vote. I came here to campaign because nobody could accuse me of being a lapdog of Brussels. And wherever I went, I said, the EU sucks. Unlike you, I think the European Parliament is a joke. Okay? Nice. But it's not a parliament. You don't have the powers that the parliament should have. But, I remember when Jeremy Corbyn was asked, in a BBC television program somewhere, ITV, between 0 and 10, Jeremy, or Mr. Corbyn, how enthusiastic are you about the EU? And he huffed and puffed and said something like 7. I would have said 3. I would have said 3. And I would still campaign for Remain. And people say, well, how come you're campaigning for Remain if you only scored 3? I said, well, if you ask me how enthusiastic am I about the Greek state, I would say 1. It doesn't mean I want to disband the Greek state. I want to fix it. So, because I'm very interested in having this conversation, I'm going to contain myself. It's not easy. And just say 2 things. First, let's not have this discussion as if we're not at this present moment in history. We are in Brighton, there is a Labour Party conference, there is an almighty struggle happening in there within the Labour Party. You've got Boris Johnson, God knows what he wants to do, but we know that he is Prime Minister because he has promised a no-deal Brexit. Yeah? And then he's making noises about a deal which can never exist. By definition, cannot exist. Okay? So what he's offering is a general election in which he will turn the Tory party, already has done it, into the Brexit party. So that's a reality. It's here. The Lib Dems have disgraced themselves by adopting ignore everything that has happened in the last 3 years, let's just cancel everything. Okay? That they deserve the contempt of every Democrat around the world. So that leaves the Labour Party. And the Labour Party is now having an almighty struggle within itself. Now what I do know is, I don't know exactly how it should happen, but what I do know is that the Labour Party has a historic duty, firstly, to follow the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. So, I think that Jeremy Corbyn is completely right when he says that he's going to offer the people of Britain a choice between two options, neither of which is destructive. Remain is not destructive. Okay, maybe it's not exactly what I would want, you would want, whatever, but it's not destructive. It's not going to create problems for your son, for supply chains, for people in London, or for people in Wigan, or for people in Preston or Scotland. And a customs union plus, which is again will be business as usual, effectively. And if you have customs union and more or less members of the single market, there will be nothing destructive there. So I think that is sensible. The small c conservative solution is being offered by the Labour Party. Now, that's something that I know the BBC is probably having a fit, even thinking about, or going, but it is true. But that's not enough. The business model is broken, politics is broken, the constitution is broken. It is essential that, just like the bankers never let a good crisis go to waste, and always make sure that huge quantities of wealth is going to be transferred from you to them during the crisis. Right? We should make sure that this crisis is not wasted in terms of pushing for deep democracy. And this is a fantastic opportunity for the Labour Party to do it. It is not just a question of getting across the line with Brexit and putting out of the way and dealing with austerity. Yes, we need to deal with austerity. We need to have a Green New Deal. We need to have humanism, radical humanism in action in the communities, across the nation, as well as in terms of foreign policy, of giving up on wars of destruction that half of the Labour Party and the rest of the political spectrum would pursue if given a chance. But what we need is to seize the day, carpe diem, as we say in DiEM25. Seize the day, because the party that offers the people of Britain the opportunity to write the Constitution will be the party that determines who writes the Constitution and under what conditions. And this is a historic opportunity, and a Citizens Assembly must produce various referenda, not just, and one of them, and this is my final sentence, the future relations between the UK and the EU must be, if you want, not so much a footnote, but one of the chapters that the people must offer in the Citizens Assembly. Do we have an English parliament? Do we have many English parliaments? One for the northwest, one for the northeast, because Scotland has its parliament, but it's Scotland. The Scots, how many are there? 7, 8 million?
5 or 6 million.
5,
6. Well, I added to them. Okay, whereas England is just gigantic, so compared to, so maybe you need more assemblies, English assemblies, maybe you need a federation. I don't know, this is for the people to decide. Okay, and what relations with the EU in the long term you will have, whether you start from the position of a customs union plus or whatever, this must be part of that process. Finally, unless we have a Labour government, all this is theoretical. So, the concerted attempts by various forces within the Labour Party to overthrow Jeremy Corbyn are fundamental assaults on the future of British democracy.
Now, I think we can have a bit more of an intimate conversation this way. I'm quite keen to let the audience in on this process as well, and we're going to have the breakout session in a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to ask a few questions to you and keep the answers short, and then we can also get answers from the audience. First thing I wanted to ask is to Lisa Nandy. We are here at the Labour Party conference at a time of really unprecedented political crisis, which is, as you say, has a much longer history, but we are here as a result of the 2016 referendum. As an MP, as someone who is in Parliament every day, but also as someone who represents the community and has worked with Sedefisi in a very different community, what do you think? How do we start letting people back in, as Julie was saying?
Well, the first thing we do is do conference completely differently. So this doesn't feel anything like a proper conversation to me. I've only been here 24 hours, but it just feels like the same sort of people on panels talking and people sitting in different rooms. So look at some of the events that are being publicised at conference around Brexit at the moment. You've got the sort of rally for the people's vote with people on the panel, all of whom want a people's vote. And then you've got people talking about how you secure a good deal with the EU, with the panel made up of people who all want to agree a deal and leave the EU. We're not talking to each other, we're not engaging in a proper dialogue or conversation. And a few months ago I went to speak at Vauxhall CLP along with Clive Lewis, who's a good friend of mine, and I said to him, this is just awful, Clive. Like, everybody in Vauxhall CLP voted Remain, wants a second referendum. I said to him, you're going to crowd surf around the room and they're going to have me for lunch. And actually, it was lovely. It was lovely. It was full of very, very kind, passionate, respectful, curious, interested people who wanted to try and understand my position on Brexit, but most of all wanted to really understand what's going on in places like Wigan. Because what they wanted more than anything was the chance to remake Britain, and that means getting a Labour government. And getting a Labour government means winning in Walthamstow, and it means winning in Wigan. So, and somebody said to me at the end of that, why don't we ever get the chance though to talk to each other? You know, she said, I bet I've got more in common with your members in Wigan than anything that divides us, but I'll never get a chance to meet them. I'll never get a chance to sort this out. So one of the things that Stella and I have been up to, she's a bit busy at the moment because she's literally about to give birth, but she's still at it, she's here, and she's still lobbying people about this. He's been trying to get a Citizens Assembly on Brexit up and running in the Labour Party. Because we think actually there are better tools at our disposal, and if we want to convince the country, we ought to start leading by example.
Julie, Yanis told us to cheer up. What does the Brexit crisis look like from the UK Parliament?
Okay, people are enthralled, really. Well, enthralled and confused, I think, and wondering what we're all doing. I have to say that, you know, the European Parliament comprises mostly of people who like the Brits. Okay, so this is a bit of a problem in a way because people have a historical love of everything British and English even.
Even the French.
Sorry?
Even the French.
I'm actually Dennis. I speak French, so maybe I have a different response. But I think there's an enormous amount of pity for us, yeah, that we have to take, you know, what we did, how we became. There is a certain amount of frustration. But, I mean, I've spoken to Barnier a couple of times, very specifically, about Citizens Assemblies. I wanted to kind of lodge the idea that this isn't going to be fixed quickly. And whatever happens to us will have an impact on the rest of Europe. And there has to be, you know, there has to be, I think, more, you know, there had to be more patience in a way. And I know he's been extraordinarily patient, but, and polite, and, you know, I mean, he's never lost his temper, you know, with the people who are coming to negotiate. You know, they're masters of negotiation, and the British negotiating team kind of turned up with no preparation. I just have to tell you a funny story. So once I arrived at Midi, at the Midi station, on my way to work, and just an ordinary taxi driver said, "Oh yes, you're British, right?" He said, "Oh, David Davis is here." He said, "Oh, with all his staff, you know," and he said, "They just walk in, come in, hands in their pockets, you know, no papers, no nothing." He said, "Michel Barnier is here as well," and he said, comes with all his staff, and he said they've got books and files and papers and boxes and all this preparation. And I think there is a kind of sense that we have not been serious about what we're talking about, yeah? That the game playing that's going on, which is very, very dangerous, is still happening. So I'm trying very hard in my job, my work, and the people that I'm talking to get people to be prepared to give us the space and time that we need. I think that's important. And the EU actually paid for and supported a research project through Collaborative Universities Research Project to look, in fact, at citizens' assemblies, and it was the University of Liverpool in my region which actually did that work and came back to present it to MEPs and to wider civil society. And I suppose also, I mean, I've never worked in any other political environment, and I just have to challenge a little bit about what you say, Yanis, because in the European Parliament we can be very powerful. We can do things, and we are often doing things unseen, under the radar, and just in terms of, some people say, oh, but you haven't got any real power at all, you can't initiate and propose legislation. But I'm going to stand up to say this, right? It's not in theatre. But we can and we do, and I can tell you how it can happen, all right? Yanis Varoufakis, who was our leader until a couple of years ago, she used to work in health, she was a member of the GMB, she worked in health, and she was on the health committee in the European Parliament. And when the scandal of the breast implants happened, so you'll all remember that, it was a terrible scandal. Women who'd had breast implants, either because they'd had cancer or because they had, you know, cosmetic surgery, whatever, suddenly found themselves with these leaking breast implants. And Yanis Varoufakis both proposed and wrote the legislation to make medical devices safe, okay? She did that. And so it's very important that people who don't work in the European Parliament have to understand the way that we do work. So yes, the Commission might say they're proposing it and they're making, you know, they're initiating it and proposing it, but other MEPs are doing that work. But we're doing it with social partners, because that is how we work in our committees. It takes a long time, and I think in a way the EU understands about long processes, the time it takes, because we're having to get agreement from people from different parties, different countries, different positions. MEPs come from many different walks of life as well. And, you know, so we're coming together in that space, and it takes time. And I think there is a sense of, yes, we understand the time that it takes. We also have some crazy people in the Parliament, but largely the people are, you know, are there in a listening mode. So just want to kind of say that, okay? You should have come and been with me. I just have to say, I was in the Greek Parliament for a week of my holidays, and I was there when the vote on asylum happened. So I was in the gallery above watching you in the Greek Parliament, okay?
It's not hard to imagine that we might have a completely different but I wanted to ask you a very specific question, hypothetical. Let's say that this institutionalized citizen assemblies process that we are outlining today does happen, and let's say that the UK does bring it to the EU. Do you think the EU would actually accept this as a viable way out of Brexit, or would it do a short visit where it say that democracy at the end of the day is less important than the EU's interests, even if the interests go against?
Well, it depends on what the Citizens Assembly says. Yeah. Look, there is a profound difference between your experiences and my experiences. The reason is that whereas Brexit was something that we were threatened with by the EU, don't forget that. Brexit was not a Greek idea. It came from the EU as a threat, the iron fist by which to impose upon the Greek people the acceptance of a gigantic loan on behalf of German and French banks. So you will allow me not to be looking at the EU through those
I was
fixed
talking
glasses.
about the Parliament, not about the EU.
No, but for me the Parliament doesn't exist. It's a beautiful building. No, actually it's not even a beautiful. It's not particularly.
Two buildings.
It's a very
Now,
expensive thing as well.
I know that I'm being very provocative, but I need to balance your very positive view. Make no mistake. All I want to do is to reinforce it.
It's a fight.
Yeah? Now, so Brexit was something that was pushed upon us as a threat, whereas Brexit is a homegrown disaster here. So there's a profound difference. To answer your question, because I think this is an important question, let me phrase it slightly differently. Suppose that Jeremy Corbyn were to go to Brussels and say, okay, our policy is CU plus, customs union plus. Barnier wouldn't be able to say anything. He would have to accept it. Because, you know, there's no political conduit from which Merkel could turn around to the Bundestag and say the British want to stay in the customs union, and said no to that. So beyond that, yes, he's one of the most civilized people in Brussels compared to the people I had to deal with. But he's not a negotiator, and he does no negotiations. Because none of those people can negotiate. They don't have a mandate to negotiate. Let me show you to understand. I'm being really very serious now, and I think fairly. He cannot negotiate because he has no democratic mandate himself personally. He has the democratic mandate conveyed to him from 27 member states. Between them, they never discuss it. So there's intergovernmental systems like that mean that nobody can negotiate. Merkel cannot negotiate, Macron cannot negotiate, Barnier cannot. What they can do is they can come up with a list, a checklist of things they demand from Britain. And Barnier is there as an algorithm ticking. He has lots of papers, as you said, because every box has been worked out by 1,000 bureaucrats. Okay, and he can only tick. So, for instance, when Theresa May went to him and said, "All right, you want 40 billion from us, whatever, 50 billion, 60 billion. You want this from us. Now we want this from you. So let's see whether we can have a deal." Barnier could not even enter into this conversation. And that's when he imposed the two-phase negotiation. He said, first you give me what I want, and then I will convey to the heads of government what you want. Now, anyone who accepts that process is a complete idiot for Theresa May. Right? Because once she said yes to that, that's it. Finished. Right? Imagine if I were to come to you and say, first you give me everything I want, and then I'll discuss that with you. This is not a negotiation. Right? But that's the only way that you can do it. Not because they are bad people or anything like that, but because there is no such thing as a federal government with a democratic mandate to negotiate. Right? So that's the answer to your question. It depends on what the Citizens Assembly says. If the Citizens Assembly says that we want to simply stay in the single market and the customs union and so on, then say okay, fine, because that's no skin off our nose, right? And it ticks all the boxes. If you're going to say to them, we're going to stay in, but we demand a minimum living wage in Hungary. Let me give you an example, right? Because it's important amongst Remainers. Most of you are Remainers. Most of us are Remainers. It's important to note that the EU is not paradise lost for Britain, right? I'll give you a simple example. There's a town in Hungary called Győr. Okay? Now there's a Volkswagen Audi plant. They build most of the engines that are going to the luxury Audis, right? In Hungary. Then they take them by truck and train, and they transfer them 700 kilometers north, whatever, west, to Ingolstadt in Bavaria, where they assemble them. They put them in the cars. Okay? That factory in Győr has the same productivity as the factories of Volkswagen and Audi in Germany. The total wage costs to Volkswagen in Hungary, right, for a month in Hungary is equivalent to 2 days in Germany. Volkswagen Audi pays no tax in Hungary, 0 tax. They have an Irish kind of deal, Irish-Dutch deal, and they pay 0 tax in Hungary. You have a drain of people from Hungary that are leaving, and the people who are left behind become nationalist quasi-fascists. That happens within a year, right? So, if the British, English, Scottish, whatever, Citizens Assembly comes to Brussels and says to Barnier or to whoever is after Barnier, we want a minimum living wage, we want common rights, and we want minimum corporate taxation across Europe, they will say no. No, no, no. Now you've got, so, if this is not simply a question of remaining, it's a question of working out how to build alliances across Europe, this is what DiEM25 is all about, that create genuine solidarity so as to have a multi-party negotiation process. So it's not just the British government that negotiates with Brussels, but it is us in Greece, the Hungarian trade unions, the German trade unions, all of us together going to the Barniers of the world and saying, this cannot continue. That, I think, is the most important.
Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question? There in the back, and then 2, 3, and then another round afterwards.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to see you here, Yanis Varoufakis. And thank you very much to all the organizers of DiEM25. Yanis, basically I have 2 questions for you. And I'm very sorry, English is not my first language, as you can see. I come from Ecuador.
It's not mine either.
But you speak perfectly.
So do you.
Thank you. I come from Ecuador. And one of the questions first is, you know, the Labour Party is so divided at the moment, you know? And then we got so many leaders, like Tom Watson and other councillors, which undermine the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, you know? And I just, you know, my frustration is I am not political myself, you know, I'm a provider myself. And I tend to actually have a little bit, I tend to work with ethics, with values, and morals and values, what is best for our society and what is best for our patients. And I feel shocked the way our leaders undermine the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn despite having progressive agenda in there. That is one question, how we bring them together, how we actually make them keep quiet, you know, at least don't undermine his leadership. And the second question, Jeremy, I know you talk quite a lot about the International Monetary Fund, and it's something that I actually, I'm very concerned, I'm very worried about how the International Monetary Fund, a repressive machinery, would you call it, that influence in the economy and the politics and social all around the world. You know, at the moment they are in my country and they being in my country, they being in Latin America, I think they are in about 182 countries where they maintain us in extreme poverty, where they privatize all our assets, and they influence all of us. I don't know how can we do, you know, with me, I'm sorry I'm going to take a couple of more minutes.
Just come to the question if you can.
Yes, I just this, how come we're going to change the International Monetary Fund? How are we going to change their, make them more accountable for the things that they do in the world? And I just, sorry, one more thing.
I think two's enough because we've not got long left. So have we got the second question? Yes, let's check here.
I would call myself an English Republican. I noticed there was a poll out that said 62% of Labour Party members were in favour of some kind of republicanism. I know it's a strong feeling, by the way, but it's certainly there. But we've had a democratic deficit in this country for a long time. We've had a crisis of democracy in this country for a long time, and therefore I echo what Yanis said. Brexit, this thing, is almost like a break. We've entered a revolution. We're in the period of the Brexit revolution. Now, it doesn't seem like a revolution, nobody's fighting in the streets, but it's got the characteristics of it, because we've got a breakdown of our political system, and we've got a collapse of our constitution, and we've got everybody going, well, what's going to happen next? And everybody looking around going, well, we're not sure. It's like politics has kind of gone completely pear-shaped. Yeah. All right, so just a question. It will be a question, okay? Which is about compromise. Where do we get with this? I want to just ask this question. And I'll just say that I don't think we're heading to either to some sort of fascism or we're heading to a democratic republic. So that's what I would say. That's the two extreme choices. Nobody necessarily thinks that's where we're going at the moment, but we're heading in that direction. Now, the question is this. In 2016, people voted. And I think it's very important to listen to what people say. And the people of England and Wales voted to leave, but the people of Northern Ireland and Scotland voted to remain. So why shouldn't there be a compromise, not invented by us in this room, but by listening to the people and doing a deal where Northern Ireland and Scotland remains and England and Wales leave, with this proviso, okay? We didn't vote to leave the single market or the customs union. So we should defend our right to be in that.
Great.
So I'm going to ask you.
What about London?
One minute of comment and then I will
We've not got that long, so if you can
Yeah.
do a question, preface it with a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, no, just about my experience inside the European institution as a press. At the beginning, when I discovered the European Parliament, it was amazing. I had the same impression. Then I did the press coverage of the European Council. It was the most terrible experience of my life, because all the work I did of the press coverage of the European Parliament was completely useless, because they took all the decision. So, but people don't know completely about it. And I think my question is, do you think that Citizens Assemblies should provide just information about it and then start a process in order to make a difference between deliberative democracy and direct democracy, like, you know, five-star movements and so on? Thanks.
Perfect. So, Yanis, do you want to take any particular, obviously the IMF one and the undermining of the leadership from your perspective? Great, go for it.
On the question of, to my friend from Ecuador, on the question of Corbyn, why is he being undermined? It's really very simple. The Labour Party sold its soul to the devil under Blair. They went into bed with the City of London. They made a lot of money. They got a lot of money. They funded the campaigns, that part of the Labour Party. Okay? The way in which they bent over backwards to unleash the evil genie of the City of London during that tenure, right? They are completely in cahoots with them. They fear a Corbyn government a lot more than they fear the permanent domination of Britain by the Tories. They will do anything to undermine Corbyn, and they have been doing it in the same way that in the United States, you know, the Hillary Clinton Democrats will do anything to prevent Bernie Sanders from becoming president, including keeping Trump in the White House, wherever. On the question of the IMF, what has happened in Ecuador, I'll be more specific, right, because I'm sure this is where you're coming from, emotionally. A year and a half ago, Lenin Moreno, the new president of Ecuador, decided to flip politically and to forge an alliance with the oligarchy of Ecuador. And to solidify and cement that alliance, he brought the IMF in when it was completely unnecessary to get a new loan from the IMF. He got a new loan from the IMF for one reason, the conditionalities of the IMF. Because the IMF gives you a loan only when it brings its own personnel into the country and says, okay, now you cut on hospitals, you cut on education, you know, you attack workers' rights and so on and so forth. So, on your point, well, Luxembourg once put it very simply, socialism or barbarism. We are moving in the same direction. Because either Corbyn is going to form a government and we're going to avoid Brexiteer barbarism, or he's not. And finally, on the question of a Brexit that respects England and Wales' decision as opposed to Northern Ireland and Scotland, if the nation stays within the customs union and the single market, which I would very much like to see, you're right, it makes no difference in the end. Not much of a difference. But I think that the point I would like to bring out concerns Northern Ireland in particular. Because Northern Ireland is a fantastic case of a new form of post-Westphalian potential sovereignty, joint sovereignty. The Good Friday Agreement effectively inscribes that. You have joint sovereignty of sorts between London and Dublin and so on. No? Why not take this further? Why not make this more formal? And that's the best solution instead of a backstop or anything of the sort.
Julie?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I would just want to talk about, just develop what Yanis is saying about having a European response to what is happening in terms of the attack on all our rights and the neoliberal project that we have to counter both in the Labour Party here in the UK but across Europe. So in the European Parliament we have an anti-austerity left caucus, progressive.
Yeah, but you've got
caucus.
Syriza in it.
So
And Syriza
you
implemented. They sorry. You have Syriza in it, and they implemented the worst austerity in the history of the universe. So they are under the Troika command, and they are pretending that out of this progressive focus. It means nothing. Sorry about this, but it's very close to the
Yanis,
heart.
if you cared to take up your place in the European Parliament, you could be in that progressive caucus.
No, I'm not going to be the progressive caucus of the people who implemented the austerity, pretending to be anti-austerity. I'm not going to be the Blairites event.
Julie, you answer the people's question.
So, what I want to tell you is maybe things that you don't know about, okay? So in the European Parliament, we have an anti-austerity progressive caucus, and we have written an alternative scenario, and those of us who are active in that, we also attend the European Left Forum, which has happened in Marseille and Bilbao over the past 2 years, and will happen, I think it's going to happen in Brussels in November. And all of you are welcome to come to that. Now what I can say is that very few Brits ever turn up, which is a great shame, okay? Often we are not participating in the European project, in that alternative European project, and we should be. And yeah?
Sorry, what are the results that you've had from these
So, for example, as a parliamentarian, yeah.
No, I mean, when you say that the left come together as an austerity, I'd be really interested because I haven't personally seen anything from that.
So, for example, Marisa Matias, who's Portuguese left MEP, working together with Ernest Urtasun, who's a Green Spanish MEP. They're both in the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, and they've been looking at issues of tax. I don't work on tax, but those two people together, working in fact across the Women's Rights Committee and in the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee on fair taxation in terms of women, okay? So if I can, and I don't work on those committees, but I'm happy to send you the information about those things.
I just need to know if there are people working on anti-austerity in Europe, that it is actually having an effect at my level. Because it's all very well, I'm very pleased that people are working hard and devoting time and energy to these things, but they mean nothing if me, as a living carer here in Britain, see zilch.
Okay, there's a new directive that we've just worked on, which is the Work-Life Balance Directive, and that is going to give paid leave to carers. If we're out of the EU and we don't implement that, okay, that won't be part of what you get as a carer. There are lots of examples. I'm not going to. Best thing to do. I've got Trevor actually works for me, okay, and so does Owen, and we'll give you that. We'll find you those examples across the different 20 committees, okay. So I wanted you to know that because lots of people don't know, right? They know about the political groups. So I'm in the Socialists and Democrats groups, and some of the people in the Socialists and Democrats groups are not on the same page, right? They're not on the same page.
They introduced austerity and they created the ideology, the theory of austerity, like Franz Timmermans, the pioneer of austerity.
So, me working across those boundaries is very, very important, right? And I'm committed to do that. Not just in the European Parliament, but with other forums that exist. I'm also doing that within the Asia-Europe Forum as well, which meant that I was in Nepal in April as a guest of the communist government there to talk about what we can do to have social welfare as a tool for peace. That is the kind of work that I think needs to happen. And I'm really happy to talk to any of you about all those other places where I am doing the work that I'm doing, as somebody on the left in the Labour Party, as somebody who supported Jeremy's leadership twice, I want Jeremy's anti-austerity politics across the whole of Europe. I don't want us just to keep it here for us in the UK. For me, it's really important that we lead with that agenda. Can I just, I want to go back to the Green New Deal. So we're talking here at Labour Party conference at Green New Deal. I signed a pledge for the Green New Deal, but it was your pledge, okay? Because the pledge for the Green New Deal and the Green New Deal idea here at Labour conference is not your idea, the Green New Deal, and I'm really sad about that, okay? The Green New Deal, as they've written, is absolutely bloody fantastic, and we should be signing up to that Green New Deal, not the Green New Deal that people are talking about here. So yes, neo-fascism. It's really scary, okay? David Dugan, who's a professor in Liverpool, has described the Conservative government under Theresa May as neo-fascist, okay? We're in a terrible place in terms of the return of fascism. I am really quite scared, and I've been doing a lot of solidarity actions with LGBT people in Poland and in Hungary. I've been on marches, pride marches in Hungary and in Poland, where I have to be protected. We have to be protected by armed guards, the military, the police. It is frightening, that assault on our rights. Really, really scary. But to answer your question, and I think because we were at the Politics for the Many conference, weren't we? You know, I agree with you. Like these, but Liverpool voted Remain. Manchester voted Remain, London voted Remain. If you're going to say, well, Scotland and Ireland, you can have, you know, you can have the thing that you voted for, which is to remain.
Brighton voted Remain.
Yeah, I know that all these cities and towns, it's going to be a massive problem. Right. I know. I just want. Sorry, Trevor. One more thing.
She's my boss, so I can't put her off. I'm really we have to talk about freedom of movement, folks, okay? I am bloody furious about any giving away of those rights. If we somehow get a weird fudge, right, about customs union and single market, and we allow tins of meat to have more rights than a human being, that's not the party that I want to be. One more round of three, very quick. Can we? I haven't got very long, so if we keep them very, very short. I know Andrea wants to say a few things at the end. The gent at the end's been very patient, and then there's two ladies in front of him, and maybe we might get a fourth if you're quick. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't going to speak. It's just that I'm actually listening. Right, I'm a Londoner with a Scottish accent, but it has significance because there was a woman outside the Labour Party yesterday with a banner, "Remain and Leave." And she'd be stickers to put on. So I took a packet of stickers and put 7 on the leave, yeah? And then I asked her, and she told me that she knew the truth and all the people, the 17 million, were misled. And I said to her, I think you're really abusive. And she said, why are you getting angry? And I'm going, it's my accent. It was actually my accent, just hear my accent. She was a nice southern English middle class, and that's how they react in the south of England. Hate to say it, but it's true. Okay, getting back to my main point.
The question.
Okay, well, my main point is as soon as I heard, I was in France at the time, as soon as I heard that they'd shut down Parliament, I said it's time to head to Putney. Yeah. We don't know the historical context, the English Civil War, okay? I voted a pox on both sides at the time. But what I do find important is that 17 million voted to leave, and they're the only ones you mention that are a problem in your leaflet, in your booklet. Not the total, because I find the ones that voted to remain, there's Clive Lewis was mentioned. Clive Lewis and his pal, the MP for here, they've got a subtext that's all racist that voted to leave. So you're not going to get a reconciliation with language like that.
Okay. Great. So let's get the lady in front. Thank you very much.
I'm a woman, not a lady. Thank you.
Sorry,
very much.
excuse
Sorry.
me, madam. Sorry.
I'm his daughter.
Londoner with a Scottish accent. No, but I've actually got one. The point I kind of am trying to get my head around is the woman that left. I think my point is to her. My question is to her more than anybody else. But it's the pan-European aspect that DiEM is offering, and yet in Britain we have MPs who are representative of their constituencies, which bring the whole kind of parochial agenda. So I would like, and the way that she was describing that when she was going to her colleagues and discussing, oh, the Citizens Assembly, and it was like, oh, I can't get my head around this. How can we change her and people like her's mind, rather than just focusing on the parochial, but focusing on pan-European, so that when a deal is taken to Europe, you are asking for the rights of the Hungarians and not just for the people in this country.
Great
so
question. Yeah. So this is I pointed at. I think it was actually this woman here and everyone.
Just briefly, I'd like to get back to the Citizens Assembly point. I mean, Parliament is reflective of society. The society is polarized. And the comment about, you know, Citizens Assembly would let the people back in. Are we sure that people want to be let? How do we make the people want to be let back in? 1 million demonstrating is a lot, but not in context of the population of the country. And making Citizens Assembly the labor, issue, you're polarizing it because it's back into the partisan sphere. And the Citizens Assembly has to be much broader and much deeper than that. And how do you deal with that issue?
Great question. Yeah. Let's take you in.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say that perhaps in Britain you should follow Yanis's idea of how to start a new party there. I have everybody discuss everything, so perhaps you can rejuvenate the parties here by doing that, starting with the very basic constitution of your parties by discussing it amongst all your members, and not perhaps as many as citizen assemblies as you can get into your constituencies.
Great. Let's start with Julie this time, and we'll finish with Janet.
Okay. Well, can we just talk about assemblies in general? When Labour lost the 2010 elections and the People's Assembly Against Austerity grew up, I found that very empowering personally. I started to go, and then those People's Assemblies became very local. They also became sectoral, so like the Student Assembly Against Austerity. So I think there already is an idea in this country about assemblies, about people. And we've been doing that since 2010. And that has been a response, actually, to that election and the austerity agenda and all the public service cuts. I was just thinking. I mean, I'm very involved in the idea of the Commons. Yeah. So in the European Parliament, we've got lots of cross-party intergroups, and one of them is an intergroup on the Commons to talk about all the things that we should be having in common, where we need to take control of the commons. So, for example, the internet. I do lots of internet governance work now. So commons around, and I did a whole thing on culture as a commons. Yeah. So I think I'm getting
as a commons. You mean throughout Europe?
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm already doing that, and I've realised we're not doing it here. So I'm doing it and really developing it with a lot of people from other countries, talking and rights to water, that whole kind of stuff. I also, because I represent a region that was really, really impacted by the floods in 2015, and I started to talk to people about river parliaments, So where people would have some democratic input, where there would be kind of democracy about what's happening with rivers, because in terms of climate change and the climate crisis, people who are living along those rivers really, really suffered. And so I started to learn about the idea of river tunnels. And I was going, that's so fantastic, you know. And I've been to the Amazon, so I've also been working with indigenous people in the Amazon through Represented Nations and People organisation. And I've been trying to say people along, you know, where people have got things in common across all sorts of boundaries, we should be having those discussions, yeah? So I'm really engaged at that level, but I don't find that many MPs are engaged at that level, yeah? And I don't know if it's just because I've only worked at a European and an international level, and I'm curious about these things, and for me they're very, very empowering. So I suppose just Jeremy promised us more democracy in the party, okay? And I think we really, really have to talk about that, okay? And there is a battle going. You know, but where we are is that most of the members are pro-Jeremy and pro-European. And that is part of the problem, okay? It is part of the difficulty that we're experiencing at the minute. We are the largest political party now in Europe. All these people came to join the party because they loved Jeremy's different way of doing politics, his compassion, you know, his kindness, his ability to listen. And actually those people are mostly pro-European as well. So we have this real kind of dichotomy in the party, and I supported him twice. As I said, I want his anti-austerity politics for the whole of Europe. I don't just want them here. That's very important.
Thanks very much.
I'll be quick. Firstly, on the question of the non-partisanship of citizens' assemblies. Look, in the end it doesn't matter. If you have it in your manifesto, you promise people citizens' assemblies, then you're elected and you do it. Then within 10 seconds, people realize that they get chosen by lottery. And then they have a voice. And suddenly everybody is going to embrace it. And just like the NHS was a Labour Party policy that then even the Tories embraced, the same thing will happen with citizens' assemblies. Pan-Europeanism. In DiEM, we exercised our mind about it. And the result is that we moved from another Europe is possible to another Europe is already here. And how are we doing this? I'll give you a very specific example. Our party in Greece is called Merekos, where Mera means DiEM, right? Day. Our manifesto, our secretariat, how we choose our members of parliament, right? It's all done through plebiscites, through votes. Who votes? Everybody. Our members, DiEM members here in Britain, are voting for the policies that the Greek party is pushing through parliament. They are voting for our candidates for parliament. And finally, on the question of respect, from the Londoner with the Scottish accent. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Remainers have been just as bad as Leavers at disrespecting the opposite side. I feel a sense of despair about that. And what I do in order to stop myself from disrespecting Leavers, this is an exercise, a mental exercise that I perform. I think of one lady in Leeds. I keep talking about her in meetings, public meetings, even in Greece. I remember, I don't remember her name. I was giving a talk, and John McDonnell was with me, and so was Hilary Benn. Actually, John McDonnell and Hilary Benn on the same platform, right? Before the referendum, arguing against Brexit. And after I had given my standard speech on the Hastings, which was in the EU against this EU. That's more or less the gist of it, right? She came to me, this wonderful woman, and she said, "My dear boy, I really like you. I really truly like you, but there is no way I will do what you're saying. I'll vote for Leave." And I'll tell you why. Because I'm all for the radical Remain, for transforming through conflict the EU from within. But if I vote to Remain, it will be David Cameron in 10 Downing Street, and he's going to see this as a fantastic vote of confidence for his establishment Remain. Jeremy's not in 10 Downing Street, you're not in 10 Downing Street, I'm voting to leave. So, am I going to disrespect that? Because I had to tell you, I had nothing to say to her. When I said to her, you know, I did make noises that in the end the communities here in Leeds are going to suffer because of supply chains, blah, blah. Let us suffer. I'm never going to vote to stay in the EU the way the EU treated our comrades in Greece. I had no argument to this. I mean, I had arguments, but they were not decisive. So, I think of her in order to maintain a strong sense of respect for leaders.
I want to a big round of applause for Yanis that is running for an interview in 3 minutes on the other side of the town. Thanks so much, Yanis, for coming. For a couple of announcements. The first one is that events like this cost a lot of money, and there is a dedicated group of campaigners and activists that are doing what they can. But every support you can give is really, really welcome. There is a box on the desk there that is going to circulate if you want to contribute to the funds can help. But most importantly, what we want is your support politically. So on these flyers that you should have received, there is a QR code, you can download the proposal, please get in touch, send us comments, observations, what we can do better to improve. Keep in mind that today the Labour Party has decided that the Brexit policy will be decided in an ad hoc conference after the general election. And I think that surely we need to talk with the Conservatives and even the Green Party. Actually, Karen Lucas is very keen on this, so very much there. But if we convince the Labour Party, we have done half the job. So that conference after the general election is the target for a movement of citizen assemblies that starts and need to keep pushing. So please, let's do it together and let's go together. I just want to finish thanking a lot of people. First and foremost, it's not with us today. Rosemary Batchelor did an amazing job with the proposal that you have seen. I want to say thank you, of course, to Gabriel, Popham, and Trevor. That is no, he's still there. Thanks so much, Trevor. Gavin Barker worked a lot on the proposal as well. He's working on Citizens Assemblies in Conwell. He's doing excellent things. Andrew Brooks, Michael Silker, Yolanda, that did all the graphical part of this proposal in 3 days before the conference. Thanks so much, Yolanda. Ben, that should have coordinated the breakout sessions, but we didn't have time. We need to do better with time first. John, Julia, Jack, Buba, Jay, Felix, Agnieszka, I can go on forever, but I